49ers cornerback Deommodore Lenoir takes issue with some comments from Willie Snead about his San Francisco 49ers earlier this offseason, and a whole lot more coming up on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Crocky209. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We love our everydayers, and we appreciate it when you hit that subscribe button, the thumbs up. Let us know that you are enjoying the pod. Drop a comment on YouTube as well. And, of course, you can subscribe everywhere you are listening to this podcast. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is sponsored by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, Croc, got a little saltiness going on this offseason. I like it on social media. Deommodore Lenoir had some words, and I think this was part of a longer live Instagram that he did. But of course, this is the part that made the headlines from Deommodore Lenoir. Nobody wants to hear about how you feel coming into the year. You've been working out. You're ready for a big season. No, they want to hear the stuff about smack talk between ex-teammates now with Willie Snead. Let's remind everybody, by the way, Croc, first, what Willie Snead said earlier this offseason about the 49ers, and we did cover it here on Locked On 49ers, as we do. Basically, he talked about how there was a lack of competition, that he didn't get a shot that he thought he deserved, and there was entitlement on the 49ers roster last year. He said on Twitter, quote, "All I want is to go back to a team that isn't afraid to let guys compete for a roster spot. These last 3 years been nothing short of entitlement. Competition breeds champions." Now, Croc, when I and shout out to Jordan Elliott, who compiled all this on NBC Sports Bay Area, a friend of the program, by the way. When I saw it in print just now, and I didn't remember it, I didn't remember the last part. Competition breeds champions. Was he throwing a dig at the 49ers for losing the Super Bowl and not being able to bring home the Lombardi? I just put that together. I didn't really think of that angle of it when I remember Willie Snead's comments from a couple months ago.
It sounds like he is taking the dig at the San Francisco 49ers. And the interesting thing about all that, right? Competition breeds champions, wanting an opportunity to compete, etc. No matter where he goes, it's going to be the same situation for him. No matter where you go, there is a certain element of roster politics, and that's in not just every sport, but I feel like every walk of life. Like, it's not fair until it's fair or until it's in your favor. So, I think that's why people like Deommodore Lenoir, can't wait to get to his comments, have kind of taken that in an offensive way, taking a dig at the 49ers. And also with Willie Snead saying he wants to get back to the AFC where they play a different style of football.
So Deommodore Lenoir had a response to this. It was a delayed response. It wasn't the Kendrick Lamar instant diss track back on Willie Snead. It took a little time with this one, but Deommodore Lenoir said this on his Instagram live earlier today, being Sunday. He said, I hope everyone had a great weekend, by the way. He said, quote, "I hope they bring Snead back so I can strap him up. He and his feelings. He over here talking about he wants to go back to the AFC North, a different brand of football. Come on now. He ain't going to do that. They know how he is." And then he put a little skull, a dead skull on there afterwards. So Deommodore Lenoir says, "Bring Willie Snead back so I can strap him up in practice." Is he trying? Here's another layer to this now with Deommodore Lenoir, though. Is he trying to say the AFC North's a tougher brand of football than the NFC West right now with the 49ers, who are trying to be the bullies of the NFL? Croc? I'm surprised he even put that out there, to be honest with you.
That's definitely what it sounds like to me. And I will say this. Anybody that has paid attention to the AFC North, it does have this stigma around it in a positive way, that it's a very tough, hard-nosed like division, right? Like the AFC North, you got Baltimore, you have Pittsburgh Steelers, you know, Cleveland Browns, and you have the Bengals. But I think it's more so the Ravens, who Snead has played for, and the Pittsburgh Steelers, where they are known to play a certain brand of football. And 49ers got a taste of that, right? Especially from the Baltimore Ravens, not so much from the Steelers. Also felt it against the Cincinnati Bengals. 49ers, they didn't do too well against the AFC North. Now that I think about it.
It's a good point. AFC North does play a certain brand of football. They got some really good teams, and it really, you know, Browns were bad for a very long time, but they're good. They beat the 49ers last year. They're teams that put up a fight for 4 quarters, and you know, it's kind of it feels pretty cliche to say that, but that's kind of what that division is built on. And all 4 of those teams in that division don't go down with a fight, and they all seem to be there in the end, competing for a playoff spot. Even the Cleveland Browns now in that division, who, by the way, the Niners lost 3 games to that division last year, right? They thumped the Steelers in week 1 because they played that division last year. They thumped the Steelers, lost to the other 3 teams.
Yeah, and that was the part where I don't even think that, like, you know, that thought crossed my mind until just now, where I was like, well, you know, they lost to Baltimore. I knew that. And then I started thinking about the Steelers. Oh, man, they blew the Steelers out. And I'm like, wait a minute. The Browns? They beat the 49ers. The Bengals? Dang, they beat the 49ers. Dang, the AFC North kind of had their way. And I'm not sure if Snead is so much talking about just those games, the 49ers against the AFC North, as opposed to just what the AFC North means to the NFL, which, you know, you got the bad weather and you got some of those teams that have built their really identity on like this physical toughness brand, which the 49ers have as well. So that's the surprising part. I think with that, if there is one team in the NFC that could say, you know what, let's pick our team up and go to the AFC North, who can hang, I would assume people would say probably 2 teams right now. 1, San Francisco 49ers. 2, probably Detroit Lions, because of who their head coach is with Dan Campbell. So just surprising that he would say that and really kind of put out a Kendrick Lamar diss track against the entire NFC. And also limit maybe teams that may be interested in them, which I don't think they really care. The teams in the NFL, for the most part, like, they don't care about all this, the petty stuff going on in his comments. If they like Snead, they'll bring him in for a workout. He'll get worked out. But it's just, you know, regardless of what you do when it comes to, you know, a profession, you don't want to make any enemies.
The 49ers are pretty deep at wide receiver, so I don't know if they're going to need to go back to the well and try to sign a Willie Snead if he's still available, you know, into training camp or something like that. But it would be interesting if Willie Snead did get brought back, and it would be fun to watch that battle in practice if that was the case. Not super surprised though. Deommodore Lenoir is like that, and from his first, it was it like OTAs or rookie minicamp, right? His rookie season with the Niners, he posted a clip against, it was Austin. Who's the undrafted wide receiver? Austin something, right? He was a pretty highly touted undrafted wide receiver that the 49ers signed, and Deommodore Lenoir was really physical with the line of scrimmage, and then posted the video on social media and got in trouble for it. He got reprimanded. He's not supposed to put practice footage on social media. And actually, they weren't supposed to be making contact, right? So I think the team
weird too.
Got in trouble for that.
As someone who played in rookie minicamp, I don't remember them telling us, "Hey, like, don't touch the opposing player."
Yeah.
So when the video was, you know, surfacing around and everybody was watching it, I was like, man, what's the big deal? Oh, there's some kind of rule? Like, I never knew that. But the hyena. That started, I mean, maybe prior to the 49ers, but definitely just the way that he had talked, he kind of backed it up in that clip. And I think that his persona really throughout Deommodore Lenoir's tenure with the San Francisco 49ers has been this guy that's scrappy and does not lack confidence. And I think we said that about him after the 2022 season playoffs, where, you know, he performed extremely well in the Cowboy game. He had an interception. There was another game. He had an interception in the playoff games. Obviously, he played very well in the championship game against the Philadelphia Eagles. But And then he carried that momentum over to this season. Definitely a guy who does not lack confidence. So if there is any player that's going to kind of put it out there that he wants to, go up against a certain person, I'm not surprised at all that is Deommodore Lenoir.
And look, we know how DBs are wired, right? Corners are kind of nuts. They're kind of out there, maybe overconfident at times. I know a guy, Eric Crocker, thinks he can golf now. Like, they get wild sometimes.
Hey, man, another year, I'm going to be coming for Peacock. I feel like that, especially as a defensive back. And, I saw someone in the chat say, oh, Croc, straight off of, a trip from Eugene. I was out there in Oregon and, we were at a camp and, I'm working with my defensive back. I coach him at Edison High School, and he got an offer from Nevada right there on the spot. So, that was exciting to see. But the confidence that you have to have at the cornerback position, everybody's watching you. One misstep, it can go wrong. You have to be able to put the last play behind you and continue to move forward. And Deommodore Lenoir, there's been several plays where, maybe didn't quite go his way, but his confidence has never been shaky at all. And I think we hear a lot of his comments coming through, or excuse me, his confidence coming through in his comments at Willie Snead.
All right, next. A question about Lenor and his contract situation. 49ers offensive line coach Chris Foerster talking about his theory and his philosophy about the 49ers and the offensive line and how he builds offensive lines. And 49ers have one of the older rosters in the NFL. All that and more coming up on this edition of Locked On 49ers. This episode of Locked On 49ers is sponsored by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And it's winner take all time in the NBA Finals. Finals set, NHL as well. FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's 150 extra bucks to play with. Bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and a whole lot more. Of course, there's NBA and NHL playoffs. WNBA, Caitlin Clark. I know Crocky's been interested in that quite a bit this season. Major League Baseball all summer long. I've been quite interested in that recently. I had a lot more fun watching Giants baseball this year, even though they've had a lot of injuries. And my son's pretty bummed that Jung-Hoo Lee went down with an injury. And, of course, you can bet on those NFL futures as well. Favorites to win the next Super Bowl are the San Francisco 49ers offensive defensive rookies of the year, and a whole lot more. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Make every moment more. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, I want to go to the chat here. One last note about Deommodore Lenoir. And the 49ers have an expensive team. They have a pretty old team as well that we'll get to in a second. But they've got a lot of football players that are really good. And they got to figure out how they can pay all of them, or as many as they can. They got to stop paying some guys, right? Like at some point, there's going to be guys they can't pay. In the chat, Helmet to Helmet 49ers podcast says, let's sign Lenor this offseason. Love that he's defending his team. He should be a keeper. And I agree with that. Deommodore Lenoir should be resigned. But, you sign Lenor, that means you're probably going to lose Charvarius Ward when he becomes a free agent in the offseason. Aaron Banks is another guy who's up. You can't pay Brock Purdy and Brandon Ayuk and Nick Bosa and Christian McCaffrey and Fred Warner and Trent Williams and Deebo Samuel and George Kittle, right? You can't pay everybody top of the market money at all these positions, and guard money's getting pretty expensive too. Corners aren't cheap. At some point, they're going to have to just say, we drafted a guy, and that guy's going to have to replace the guy we just drafted 4 years ago because we can't pay everybody.
Could the 49ers have thrown a contract offer at Deommodore Lenoir this offseason?
After that, this was his third season, right? So after 3 years, so they could sign him this offseason, yeah. But this is the first time. You couldn't have done it earlier than after a player's accrued 3 seasons.
So that's the interesting part, because, obviously they made the decision to extend, or, whatever they did. He had a tender, but Jauan Jennings. And we talked a lot about that, especially at that position. And we talk about roster building. And I'm curious to know maybe what their future plans are with Deommodore Lenoir. Do they have money set aside for him? Because, a week ago, prior to the Jauan Jennings signing, if you would have told me, hey, Croc, you can do one of these two moves, which one are you doing? Extend Deommodore Lenoir for a few seasons, throw some money at him, or extend Jauan Jennings, based off of the draft moves they made, it would have been a no-brainer. Like, well, if you take Jauan Jennings away, you got Debo, you got Ayuk, you got Ricky Pearsall, you got Cowing, and you still got some other, younger guys that you're bringing back at the receiver position. And you still have Jauan Jennings that has to play this year. So moving forward, hey, man, I would rather have Deommodore Lenoir locked up. So I'm just curious to see what their plans are with that, because clearly they didn't make it a priority this offseason. And the tough thing is, if he just had a really good year, if Deommodore Lenoir has another really good year, how much do you have to pay him? As opposed to if you would have threw some money at him this offseason.
By the way, according to the chat, Deommodore Lenoir, Florence, Charlene weighing in. Apparently, Demo's a handsome fella as well. Croc. So just throw that out there as well. That's worth some money, right? That's marketability right there. So he might get paid even a little extra bump there for Deommodore Lenoir from the 49ers. To be honest with you, I was thinking about that contract from, by the way, the 49ers, the official 49ers Twitter account put out a video and it showed Jauan Jennings coming into the facility. He had a suit on. His suit didn't even fit that good. Is that how the kids are wearing them these days? Because remember how things got almost too tailored? Or are they starting to wear them a little bit looser? His suit was a little loose on him. I didn't dislike that look. He had the flaming orange hair going, and he came in and he was all smiles.
He was excited,
so pumped. He was even a little bit. He's even started to get shaken up a little bit. Signing this contract, and this isn't like a huge superstar contract that he's signing. With some of the money that professional athletes are making these days, 2-year, 10 mil guaranteed, 15 mil potential contract. I mean, that's still life-changing money. And it was really cool to see how excited he was to sign that contract. And I think about, okay, if he gets all 15 million of that over 2 years with the money the guys are making these days, there's backup. There's number 3 wide receivers making more than that. There's backup tight ends making that money. That is, and I've called him a tight end in his usage. But that's a bargain deal that they signed for Jauan Jennings. Right? Like for what he gives the team. And I know it was only 19 catches on 30 targets last year, whatever it was, but over the course of his career, 78 catches, 60 of them, I think, or just 58 or 60 of them for touchdowns or first downs. The way he blocks he's a player that probably doesn't get the recognition he deserves around the league. He's not someone you're starting in your fantasy leagues. He showed up big in the Super Bowl, though. Like, he's a valuable player. And if you can get a player on a deal like that, it's worth it all day long, even though he's like your number 3 guy, which means he's your number, 6, 7 option on offense. I mean, I think that's easy signing from the San Francisco 49ers, right? Where they're able to figure out a deal for him. And like, look, we got to pay a lot of guys a lot of money. That's the type of player you want to sign.
Yes, and I think when you saw the energy, we know that he brings that to the football field. You made a comment, though, about 6th or 7th target, and maybe when it comes to his priority as a run blocker, that maybe bumps him up on certain things because of his, tenacity, because of the infectious personality that he has. But could somebody else be 6 or 7 target for less than 15 million?
15 mil over 2 years. I want to actually, I'm going to look up how much. Hold on. I'm going to look up a couple of contracts.
I see in the chat.
Yes.
We got Ian Sharp. He says about the same as Bourne's contract. And Bourne, Kendrick Bourne, who Ian is talking about. Kendrick Bourne did sign a decent contract when he left the 49ers. I want to say about 3 years, 21 million or so with New England.
Yeah, and so I get around I thought it was more per year than what Jauan Jennings just got. I was looking up Charlie Warner's contract, so I was a little surprised what Charlie Warner got. this offseason from the Atlanta Falcons. Charlie Warner got 3 years, $12 million. And so obviously that's not big money. It's less than what Jauan Jennings got, but Jauan Jennings is by far a more valuable football player than Charlie Warner is. And we're talking about backup, maybe number 3 type tight end. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, I love it. I think that's money. That's the type of deals the 49ers have to start signing. And look, you got to pay one corner at a time. So if you just swap out Ward for Lenor and got to pay a guy, I understand if that's the way they go about things. But when it comes to, and we'll talk about the offensive line here, can you pay? There are guards making $15, $18, $19 million a year. The 49ers can't pay a guard that much money right now, right? So if Aaron Banks is up for that contract, he's somebody that's going to have to walk, I think, from the 49ers.
Well, part of the reason why you can't make those type of payments is because you are paying a guy like Jauan Jennings. So I keep coming back to that. And it's not that I don't like Jauan Jennings, the football player, and I clearly see his impact on the 49ers roster. My thing is just, is his role replaceable for less than $10 million guaranteed? And I would say that, yeah,
I would buy that where you're like, look, man, this is 19 catches. I know it's a valuable 19 catches and he's a good blocker, but you should be able to replace that with a rookie contract. I can buy that argument.
And that has been my argument, and I haven't read the comments, and I know a lot of people like love the signing. I love the signing if you take everything else away. Like if you're just saying 49ers re-signed Jauan Jennings, I feel great. But if you're telling me, oh, they paid him X amount, and you're talking about, and again, I'm curious to see how they do certain things. Maybe they have all the answers, but you talked about not paying a guard more money or having to re-up Aaron Banks, and Deommodore Lenoir, what's going to happen with his contract, and Brandon Ayuk, that stuff is up in the air. So you make this signing. I just feel like his production, whether it's catching the ball or even blocking, is more replaceable by a rookie contract. So it's just, if I'm thinking Madden, right? If I'm thinking John Madden, I know people think like, oh, it's John Madden, you can't do this and that. I like to build the roster a little bit more like realistic, and Jauan Jennings would have been like, he would not have been re-upped.
Yeah, but so that's one where you trade him during the draft for a day 3 pick, basically, right? Get another draft pick, get some more guys in to compete, and a stars and scrubs roster. Croc talking about a stars and scrubs roster for the San Francisco 49ers kind of goes along with what Chris Foerster was saying about what he looks for in offensive linemen. Let's get to that next. This episode of Locked On 49ers is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Get a special offer for our listeners. Game Time makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier, and it's already fast and easy on the Game Time app because prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. Killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes all the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. And I love Game Time. I've used it to get concert tickets after the show has already started, get a nice little deal on a show that was kind of a last minute thing. Maybe I'll go see the show. Maybe I'll go see this band tonight. Maybe I'll go see a baseball game. I got $11 tickets to go see the San Francisco Giants on some last minute tickets. Flash deals, zone deals, all in pricing. You're getting a great deal. No surprise fees at checkout. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
I think I got to go to the comments real quick, man. There have been some comments. Shout out to 916 49er, and I love my Sacramento people. He said, Croc can't guard Jauan. And I will say this. You are correct. Croc cannot guard Jauan. And the Croc I'm talking about is 37-year-old Croc. But if you're saying 25, 24, 25, 26-year-old Eric Crocker.
Hold on. Croc, would 26-year-old Eric Crocker do to Jauan Jennings what Deommodore Lenoir would do to Willie Snead in camp if Snead showed up this year?
Hey, listen, Jauan Jennings, he's a dog. But he was the type of receivers I love to guard. If you want to talk about a guy who I would have trouble with, the Jacob Cowlings, right? Like just the quick, shifty, smaller guys. I was a big corner. That's a little bit more difficult. 6'3", 215, and you can't outrun me. Licking my chops. Like, let's go, Jauan. Let's line it up. So that would have been fun. Obviously, it's hypothetical. Can't go back in the future. But that was exactly the type of receivers that I guarded best.
You remember when we were doing our scouting report on Jauan Jennings coming out of Tennessee? And do you remember that one play he caught the ball and did a little after the catch? And if you freeze frame after the catch, there was probably 7 of the 11 defenders from whoever Tennessee was playing in that game on the ground. Croc, you trying to tell me you wouldn't be one of those guys on the ground after a Jauan Jennings catch?
Hey, listen, we said cover him. Bring him down. That's a totally different ball game, right? So my job is to make sure that he doesn't catch the ball, because if he catches the ball, Jauan Jennings was a guy who I want to say between him and Ayuk, like led college football on run after catch. Like that was probably one of the things that Kyle Shanahan loved about him. So, man, he was a monster. He still is. I think he doesn't give the targets that would like allow him to maybe show you a lot of that run after catch ability, but I'm sure he still has that. And his blocking ability off the charts. He probably would have put hands on me. That would have been a struggle. But just if we're just talking about just pure one-on-ones out in space, and Croc, you got to go guard Jauan Jennings. That was a matchup that I would definitely take on.
Well, look, thankfully Croc never had to face 25-year-old Brian Peacock, because that was a different thing. Croc wouldn't have been able to deal with that speed, that deep downfield speed that I used to possess.
You wouldn't have got off the line.
I would have been off the line before you knew what happened. My release package on point, downfield. Picture DK Metcalf if he was white. We're talking about 6'4", right? If DK Metcalf was white, and had never stepped in a weight room in his entire life, and was like 63 years old. That's the scouting report on Brian Peacock.
Yeah.
Very straight line-ish. You don't want to see the 3 cone.
I think part of what makes DK, a terrific prospect coming out of college is the strength, right? It was the speed and power and explosiveness kind of like mixed together. And he was quick off the line. So if you're quick off the line, then, I definitely could have coached you up, made sure that you could run some routes.
I mean, the hand usage, I don't know if you could have dealt with it, Croc. I want to go to a video here from 49ers offensive line coach Chris Foerster at OTAs, and talking about offensive line philosophy and how they end up with the guys they end up with, in free agency and especially the NFL draft. And I think he was asked mostly about, offensive tackles. Like, okay, guys, you guys didn't go draft an offensive tackle, huh? That's interesting. How come? And this was the response from Chris Foerster.
Play, and this is a cool discussion. I love this discussion. There's a line below which that with offensive line play that if you just drop a little bit below it, it's a gaping hole. It just all of a sudden you're like, he can't block anybody. And now we got a major problem. But as long as they're at that line and just above it, you can survive it, and you can take care of them. We've got ways within our system. We can chip. We can do all sorts of things to help guys, slide lines, double team the best rusher on the team. There's so many mechanisms to help alignment. If a guy can't get open, if a guy can't catch the ball, that's where we have a problem. But an offensive line play, you got to be careful. You got to have those 6, 7, 8 guys that are just at that line or above, and that's the challenge. Where's that line in the draft? Is it the 3rd round, 2nd round, 4th round, 5th? When's that line where all of a sudden the tackles have dried up, the guards have dried up? Now you're talking about drafting backup players, which is fine. They're backup players, but they're not going to be long-term starters for your team, and that's the challenge for me. Because eventually the guys that can run and score touchdowns run out. They're not there anymore. So you have to find those quality starters at other positions. And you got to be right, because oftentimes when you draft a lineman in the 4th or 5th round, there might be a guy that could come in immediately and contribute on special teams, contribute to be a backup linebacker, safety. And that's where, so I'm not, okay, we didn't draft him 1st, 2nd. We got to take somebody in the 4th round here, because I got 5 guys, got 5 holes to fill. So there's a line.
All right. Let me get that off the screen there. Okay, there we go. Interesting. What do you think there about? I understand what he's getting at. To a certain extent, it sounds like the 49ers philosophy might be like, hey, Chris, we're going to give you guys that are just barely at the line, and you're going to have to make do. And eventually, even if we or even if we draft a guy who's really good at left guard, I don't know if we're going to be able to pay him. So we're going to draft another guy to replace him at left guard. And Trent Williams is going to be gone. So at some point, the 49ers, it sounds like, might have a line with guys who are just good enough. And Chris Foerster sounds like he's okay with that, which is kind of weird. Like I expected him at the end to say like, well, I wish I could have one of these other guys in the first or second round, but we didn't draft them. So, but I don't know. What do you take from what he said about that philosophy there with the 49ers offensive line? Because it didn't sound like they were too worried about having a powerhouse offensive line. They just want to be good enough up front.
It sounded to me a lot like the conversation you and I were having. They can't just take anybody and throw them at the position and think that is going to be a fit for what they do, or a guy that's going to make an impact. So right now, realistically, hey, if we can't have a guy like, we can't have offensive line full of Trent Williams. Can I get some guys that can you just do your job a little bit, right? Can you be right above that threshold to where I can coach you up and you can figure out how to just get in the way of guys, wall guys off, be good at something, right? Be good at outside, you move well in space. And if you can do those things, we can scheme around it and win games, which essentially is what they've done with guys like McKivitz. Again, a lot of people make comments and they'll think about very specific moments, right? Well, Chris Jones ran free on this play. That's why the 49ers lost. And it's like, Chris Jones has run free on a lot of guys. He's bullied a lot of guys. Yes, there was a mental mistake there, even more so than the physical mistake. Right. But the thing is, you were in the Super Bowl, and there was an offensive line full of guys who you would probably like to replace that contributed to having the number one running back in the league, the most efficient passing quarterback in the league, that was consistent throughout the entire season. And it's going to be a little bit more difficult than I think people think to just replace those guys. Now, this isn't like the whole Cassius March, John Lynch thing where it's going to be hard to replace him. I think they ideally would love to replace some of these guys, but man, it's harder to do that, especially with where you draft, especially with your money and your financial situations. So let's figure out if we can just find some guys to where, man, they can you just make this block? Can you just do this? You don't have to be Trent Williams. You don't have to be this guy that's just crazy screaming at guys at the next level, or isn't going to allow any pressures, but can you be good enough to where we got the most efficient quarterback in the league and the number one rusher in the league? And if you can do that, then we can work with it. And I think that's what he's saying. But if you told him, hey, you want 5 Trent Williams, I'm pretty sure he would take that.
I think he'd be okay with that. He talks about how, okay, well, we can scheme things up. We can help here if we need to, if we have a mismatch. And but I wonder, it's the quarterback thing. When you have a really good quarterback and he makes all of a sudden all of your receivers look a lot better, it makes your offensive line look better because you're getting the ball out on time. I wonder if Trent Williams makes the rest of the line look better. And if you had a full season without Trent Williams and a group of 5 guys now that were kind of just good enough and, over the line and fine, but not like, would the same player look worse, right? Like, would Colton McKivitz start to look worse if you didn't have a Trent Williams on the other side? Would Jake Brendel look worse if there wasn't a Trent Williams on the line as well, where they knew they could run behind them when they needed to? They knew they don't have to help there, so they can help elsewhere. That's where I would start to get a little bit worried about that philosophy on the offensive line. And at some point, you're going to have to find some pretty physically talented dudes especially offensive tackle. And I'll buy, especially on the interior in the NFL, guard, center. You can get away with not spending a lot of money. You can get away with not drafting high picks and just drafting and developing tough, smart guys, finding guys off the street. And they've done that with, Feliciano and other players in the past. And you can find some good football players. I would start to get a little bit worried at tackle post Trent Williams if they're not able to find someone early in the draft that fits what they're looking for, and might have to start spending money that they don't have to even just get by at tackle because of how expensive tackles are. And they just let Mike McGlinchey walk because they didn't think that was worth paying. But at some point, they might have to pay that type of player because they didn't draft and develop any tackles.
Well, and that's the tough thing. I think it comes off as if they're not drafting and developing guys, but they have drafted offensive linemen. And when you look at,
I'm talking
tackle specific
tackle here, like, because interior, that's what I was saying. Is like interior, you can find a guy and get by, but even the guy they traded up for in the 3rd round, they're like, oh, you're going straight to guard, dude. So it's like, where do you get your tackles specifically?
Well, I think you get your tackles where they drafted Mike McGlinchey 9th overall. That's the guy who every game he was healthy, he started for them. And he was a guy that earned a big payday moving forward with Denver Broncos. 49er fans wanted him out of there. They no longer wanted to watch Mike McGlinchey in the 49er uniform. And that's a tough thing too. Just because you draft someone doesn't mean that, again, he's going to end up being Trent Williams. Where do you find it? Where was Trent Williams drafted?
Top 10.
Top 10. So ideally, that's where you're going to find them. And hopefully you can find them later. But especially when you're talking about specifically tackles, those guys are not only going in the 1st round, but sometimes they're going higher. Now, was there a guy that the 49ers had their eye on in this class, and then maybe he was just a little bit out of reach? And that's clearly a possibility.
Yeah. And
I don't know. They're very specific to their scheme and how they want guys to do certain things. And you have to have a certain run blocking ability. You have to have a certain movement ability. Was that guy available to them? There were guys you and I liked.
Yeah. But
how much did they prioritize what that guy did and how he would fit with their team? And would he just come in and day one, you're better than McKivitz? Or are people saying, well, regardless of if he's better than McKivitz day one, draft him, develop him, even though we got him later, even though there's things to work around, and maybe he's better than McKivitz the following year. So you just deal with whatever you deal with year one. And that's probably a conversation that happened a lot in-house with the 49ers.
And that's kind of where I'm at with it. And, they didn't have 1st round picks for multiple seasons in a row, missed some 2nd round picks as well because of some trades that they made. And so at some point that starts to set you back, and you have that opportunity to maybe find the right tackle, defensive line in those cases. And then this year they come up and they finally have a 1st round pick, and they still don't draft one of those types of positions. They drafted a wide receiver. Now that receiver could turn out to be great in Ricky Pearsall. But at some point you got to find your tackles, you got to find your defensive linemen. Those are things you have to draft high. And the guys they drafted this year might not play a lot. So then it's like, okay, well, maybe the tackle that was there wasn't perfect now, but guess what? He's not going to play, and the other guys you drafted anyway aren't going to play either. And you might have had yourself a starting offensive tackle of the future, but you got to take a shot on him, even if he's imperfect. And so that's kind of just, I'm interested to see how it plays out there as the team gets expensive and old right now.
And one other thing we've been talking about, they haven't drafted tackle. They actually are drafting tackles, but they're drafting tackles to play guard.
Right. Yeah. Everybody but no, I take it back. Actually, their interior guys kind of stayed on the interior. Colton McKivitz, they tried him at guard, didn't work out, and then he ended up back at tackle and has played better there. I don't know if that's just because of time. And I wonder if Pooney might be able to pull that off where he starts, because a lot of guys start at guard and then end up going back out the tackle. And I wonder if maybe that would potentially be a plan for Pooney if he proves, maybe we give him a shot at right tackle at some point in the future.
We're still waiting to see if Spencer Burford is a guy who they end up giving a shot at tackle. Like that was a guy who he played some guard early on at UTSA, and eventually he was an offensive tackle, like a left tackle. Showed a lot of athleticism, a lot of ability. But the 49ers said, nope, we're going to draft you and we're going to put you at guard. So they are drafting some tackles, and we've seen that. But again, they're playing a lot of them at guard, maybe seeing more of a fit there. And that maybe I would love to see a chart that shows how many late round tackles stay tackles, or I want to say late round, day 3. How many day 3 tackles, like guys that were tackles in college, stay tackles in the NFL and don't go play guard?
Thanks, everybody, for making Locked On 49ers your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Appreciate everybody jumping in the live. We always appreciate everyone is also listening to us on the Monday morning on your commute, maybe to work. Make sure you subscribe wherever you are listening to this podcast. Croc and I back tomorrow right here, Locked On 49ers.